Reading with your kids.
Hola, ni hao, konnichiwa, assalamu alaikum, shalom, mahaba, moni muli wanji, namaste, jambo, bienvenidos. Hi, my name is Jedley, and this is the Reading with Your Kids podcast, an iHeartRadio Best Kids and Family Podcast Award nominee. We are coming to you from the beautiful neighborhood of Reedville in the southwest corner of Boston, Massachusetts. We're so delighted that you're joining us in our mission to help families grow closer through reading. Please be sure to subscribe to the show on the iHeartRadio app, on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Amazon Music, Stitcher Radio, wherever you find your podcasts. Our guest today is Holli Kenley. Holli is here to celebrate shifting bravely, a path to growth, healing, and transformation. Before we invite Holli into the studio, we want to let you know that this episode of the Reading with Your Kids podcast is brought to you by another great podcast, the Salvage for Kids podcast, starring our Dean of all things STEM and STEAM, Jennifer Swanson, and Jeff Gagne. This is a fantastic podcast that gives kids and families a peek into the world of scientists, engineers, and other explorers as they solve problems in their jobs using math, technology, science, inspiration, curiosity, all the things that you and your kids love. Here are some of the topics that the Salvage for Kids podcast is going to be exploring. Why do dogs and cats need to go to the doctor? How can you hold the sun in a donut? And how can a teeny tiny mask help the James Webb Space Telescope spot exoplanets? I want to know what an exoplanet is. Well, I can find out, and you can too, by listening to the Salvage for Kids podcast. You can find Salvage for Kids on Apple Podcasts, and you can also listen to the show from their website, salvageforkids.com. Oh man, I am so excited. You know, many of you know that I've had a couple of podcasts in my career as a podcaster. One of them was called the We Choose Respect podcast, and our guest today was a regular guest on We Choose Respect, and we created so many wonderful, thought-provoking, so many wonderful, thought-provoking episodes. I just know that today is going to be special. Please welcome to the show the author of Shifting Bravely, Holli Kenley. Hey, my friend, how are you?
Hey, Jed, I am really good. And thank you for that warm introduction. And it was funny because the other day I was looking for, you said we did a lot of podcasts together, which we did. And so I was looking up to see when we did the series on Another Way. Mm-hmm. And Jed, we've known each other like around 10 years. So
help me, Elizabeth, I'm coming home.
I know. So we have history, and I'm so proud of that and pleased with that. And I think of you as a friend and respect the work that you're doing and that you've done. So I'm just excited to be back today.
Yeah. Well, we should start off by saying that Holli is a therapist, and Shifting Bravely is probably not a book you're going to sit down and cuddle up with your 5-year-old and read out loud together. Maybe your 2-year-old who can't get to sleep and you just run out of things to do with them. That maybe, because I certainly did that when my kids were 2. But Shifting Bravely, I think, is a book that's going to make a difference in your life. Tell us a little overview of Shifting Bravely, please, Holli.
Okay, Shifting Bravely is about what the subtitle is called A Path to Growth, Healing, and Transformation. And just a little bit of a backstory is in 2018, I had a book that came out on betrayal. It was called Daughters Betrayed by Their Mothers, Moving from Brokenness to Wholeness. And as a marriage and family therapist, I do a lot of work around betrayal and trauma and all of that, and I've actually written 4 books on betrayal. So it's a topic that is close to my heart when I feel real comfortable talking about and addressing. And after that book came out in February of 2018, again, I don't think I mentioned the subtitle. The subtitle is Moving from Brokenness to Wholeness. I just knew, Jed, that someday I was going to write another book on why it is that some people embrace change, why it is that some people don't, why it is that some people enter onto a path of growth or healing and stay with that and sustain that change and that growth, and why is it that some individuals are not able to do that. What I wanted to do, and there's lots of books on that, Jed. Mm-hmm. So what I wanted to do with this book, which I've been doing for quite some time, is make it really, really safe, make it really, really lay compatible. It's not just for a clinical audience with a lot of clinical jargon in it. And so I wrapped this book around the metaphor of a gardener. And let me just read the first quote in the opening. And that kind of explains that and sets the stage for the whole book. And I just think this is so hope-filled and it's so inviting. And this is a quote by Steve Goudier. When you assess your own life, consider it with the eye of a gardener. Underneath the surface lies rich, fertile soil, waiting to nurture the seeds you sow. Even more than you can imagine will grow there if given a chance. So we begin with the assumption that every person is capable of change. Every person has these seeds within us. And I thought I'd take that a little bit further for parents as we talk about this concept and thinking of their children as seeds, and that they are so capable of anything and everything if we as gardeners, meaning we as parents as gardeners, help them to grow in the right ways and responsible ways and all that. But first of all, we have to be healthy individuals ourselves, and so that we as parents can always change and grow and transform. So the book is built around that metaphor and the 4 seasons of winter, spring, summer, and autumn, and a growing process that takes place during those 4 seasons, from a shift's genesis to the seeds to its harvest. So I put that out there because it's metaphorical in nature. However, there are lots of stories in there. I used anonymous client stories, and then I also sent out a letter of invitation on different platforms for individuals to write about a shift in their life. And the only criteria for submitting this shift was that it had to produce a positive healing or growing experience. So it's filled with stories of real people who have made real change in their lives. And I think it's the most beautiful book I've written.
Yeah. Well, one of the things I want to say before we dive into Shifting Bravely is that your books, they're chock full of information and knowledge and wisdom, but it's not like reading a textbook or like reading a lot of self-help books. And I've read so many of them, and to be honest, there's so many of them that are really, really hard to get through because it's just not written in a way that's meant to be enjoyed reading. Your books are really easy to read and really easy to get into, and I hope that I know that a lot of people think, well, if a book's any good, it has to be hard, it has to be difficult, it has to be filled with those jargons and numbers and notes and go here and go there. And your book, the information that you provide is fantastic. It's easily digestible. And that's like food. If you can't digest your food, you're wasting your time.
Jed, thank you so much, because that has always been my goal, as I said to begin with, is to make it safe and to make it understandable. Whenever we're going to be talking about or asking someone to consider a change, we don't want there to be judgment. We certainly don't want there to be shame involved, like, assuming that something's wrong with you and you've done this and you've done that. And that's why I love that quote from Steve Goudier that you are capable of change. There's seeds inside of you. And through the stories and through the shift, the clients' anonymous stories, you see brave individuals who you can connect with and relate to and join in their stories. So that's my intention, is to make this path really inviting. Okay. At the end of every chapter, there are exercises. So it's also not just to sit back and feel good and, just absorb a little and not. I challenge you, I ask you to, to step onto this path of shifting bravely. And Jed, one of the most important themes in this book, if I could just go there for a moment, is that what we see externally in the world, and this has been going on for some time, number one is that there are so many quick fixes that, just try this, just try that, just keep a gratitude journal or say these self-affirmations every day. Just do this, just do that, and you're gonna be fine. And I'm not saying that I don't use those in therapy or those aren't good tools after you do the hard work. And so that's my first main point, is it's clear when you look at these stories and you're reading through this that these folks didn't go for quick fixes. Mm-hmm. They did the hard work. Okay, number two is that because we are so externally focused, is that we are constantly looking outward then for, again, those quick fixes, or if this doesn't work, I'll try that, or I'll try that, or I'll try that. And in order to do really deep work and work that's going to change us and sustain us, we have to turn inward. There's just no ifs, ands, or buts about it. And so that's really addressed in chapter 3, a shift awaiting attention. And I talk about how the seeds are starting to stir, the seeds of discomfort, how they're calling us, and it is our natural inclination to turn outward, because that's what we're being messaged to do day in and day out. Yeah. And I say, no, pause, put a pause on the noise, get still, like a gardener, turn inward, and pay attention to your soil, to your soul.
Yeah. One of the things that I realized as a parent was I was able to embrace a bit of wisdom that I had heard as a social worker, and in understanding that I'm not able to change somebody else. I might be able to offer them advice. I might be able to share some information with them, point them in a certain direction, but they have to make the changes themselves. All I can do is change myself. And I think as a parent, there was a time, when my kids were in that very difficult middle school age where things were getting very frustrating. And I said, well, how can I change these kids? How can I help? And at one point, I realized, with the help of my beautiful wife, that lets me worry about me and how can I change, and how is my ability to change the way I parent, how is that then going to help my kids? And it made a really huge difference in our family dynamic. It became a much, not perfect by any means, but it became a much happier house. And those really difficult spikes and valleys kind of smooth out.
That is so important. It's critical that we as parents do that. And something connecting to that, and I talk about this in a couple of my other books, but I do touch upon it here, and we're talking about it in that external thing that I mentioned a minute ago, our focus outward. So, one of the things that is so important, and I know you talk about this on your show, and it's why I love reading with your kids, because when we're reading with our kids, we're connecting. That is connection on steroids. I love it. And so an example of what you just said, what's happening with our kids today is that they're given messages, and it's about false connection. There is no way, in my opinion, on earth that when people have 5,000 followers that these are deep connections.
Mm-hmm.
I don't believe that. And so as parents, what we can do is then model not searching for connection on our devices. We can use those sometimes, but we need to put those away at other times. And we need to see parents, guardians, relatives coming together and talking face to face and putting down the devices and listening and empathizing. And when we're doing that as adults, our children are going to see that. So we have to model that first. And then we need to set aside time where we are doing that with them, mm-hmm. thus reading with your children. Because a break in connection is at the root of trauma. If we don't connect with our primary caregivers and those who or whoever that might be, that's when trauma first enters into a child's life. Mm-hmm. So I'm just so grateful for you and other people that are, in your field getting that message across.
One of the messages that you just shared with us, and it's something, one of the things I love about this is that there are light bulbs going off during conversations like this. There are light bulbs going off in my brain. I know my brain is too dim. You don't see the light bulbs going off, but I can feel them. This brain's almost 100 years old. But we've talked here on the podcast about the fact that our kids are exposed to thousands and thousands of media messages every single day. And they're usually giving our kids messages that we don't want them to hear. You're not good enough. You need that. You need to buy that. And you do this and do that. But they're also exposed to us. And we are giving our kids messages every single day. And like the messages that the kids are seeing in the media, some of the messages that we're sharing with our kids might not be the ones that we want them to see. We don't want them to see us constantly on our device. We want them to see us picking up a book or calling an elderly relative to see how they're doing, visiting, taking food over, helping the neighbor. Those are what we want our kids to see, because when our kids see that, they'll model that. They're not going to model if we say, talk to you got to come and take care of me when I'm old. They'll come and take care of you when you're old if they see you taking care of others when they're old.
Yes. Jed, and I think adults, because I talk about it in Shifting Bravely, we're missing connection as well. We've been in this a while now, for over years, and I think we're scratching our heads going, why don't I feel connected? Why am I turning to substances or this or hobbies or pastimes or work or whatever it might be? And that's because we with ourselves. And so too is what Shifting Bravely is about, is this whole theme of reconnecting, and that it's hard work. When norms and set, societal norms, cultural norms, it's hard to make those changes. We're going against the current. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And that's a lot of people start to change. I talk about this in this season Summer Strong. A shift faces recurring resistance. there is internal resistance, our own self-doubts, shaming, can't say that word today, deprecation. And then there's just external forces that don't want us to change, that don't want us to step against the norms of what is. So got a little bit sidetracked there, but what's important is that's why I put the subtitle as we have to continue to fight for what we want and to be brave in that, to be vulnerable in that, to be courageous in that, but to capture what we for our families.
Mm-hmm. Now, somebody is out there, somebody walking through a bookstore, they might see Shifting Bravely in the subtitle, A Path to Growth, Healing, and Transformation. Some might think, I like to change, I like to grow, I like to transform, but I'm not really broken from anything. I don't see a big need to heal. Is this book going to be a service to those folks?
Thank you for asking that. Yes. One of the things that if clients, again, I deal in the area of abuse and trauma. Some clients come in who are just satisfied. I love the word dis/ease. Dis-ease. There's nothing major going on. There's just they're feeling kind of stuck, kind of stagnant, just a little dissatisfied with life. There's just this kind of dis-ease. And usually what happens to that, if that goes attended, that usually then starts to, there's a story in the book. One of the individuals who submitted a story just kind of had this dis-ease in her life. And over time, she, got married, had a couple of sons, and she's a busy working mom. She started developing gut issues. And it ended up being, I think it was formally, she doesn't ever say for sure if the formal diagnosis of Crohn's, but she alludes to that. But my point being is that, a lot of folks fall in this category, Jed, where they're making it. Mm-hmm. And they're not, if I'm hearing your question right, they're not in a place where the discomfort is managing them. They're still able to manage the discomfort or the dis-ease. And so it does take a look at that and challenges that a bit. Do you want to shift that? Mm-hmm. Do you want to just stay in that, kind of in that quagmire of, life's okay, but it's not great. Mm-hmm. So yes, it does. Yeah. It's not always this big, trauma-based wound that has to be addressed.
Yeah. Well, I think too, that's certainly the quote that, you start the book with of, looking at this garden and realizing that there's a whole lot that can be growing in this soil, all these seeds. And even those of us who are at a season in their life that they're pretty happy with and things are going well, and I've achieved most of the things that I set out to accomplish, but I'm still alive. I'm not ready to be buried in that fertile soil. I want to use that and to do new things and to see how far I can push myself and to see what else is possible. And so I think, from what we've been talking about, I think that's possible with this book as well, that, just kind of sitting down and listening to stories and seeing how people have made some amazing transformations in their life. Maybe sit back and go, thank you, Lord, I haven't had to deal with that, but I can learn from this person. I don't have to go through that to learn how I can move forward and do new things with my life.
Yes. I don't know about you, Jed, but I think it's been a little bit different during the pandemic and all of the things that have shifted, no pun intended, during the past couple years. But there's so many people, I believe there are so many individuals who are really stuck in their professions and in their careers, and they're settling. And right now there's such opportunity to do different things. But when we change, there's fear around that. Mm-hmm. There's uncertainty. There's risk. So the book speaks to that. When in those moments of uncertainty and vulnerability, that I know in my life too, at the most vulnerable moments, I had the most growth. Mm-hmm. And so, one of the stories was a gentleman who was a teacher and a psychotherapist, and he just got so burnt out. He was worked and worked and worked and got burnt out, but he was again, what we're saying, he was kind of fearful. Do I retire? I can't quit. Should I quit? Should I work part-time? It's also finding that balance for yourself in moving forward and being willing to take some chances, to take some risks, and believe in yourself too.
Yeah. You're talking about retirement, and I've seen so many people that they've been in a profession that has a very generous retirement plan, and they're in it 20 years, and they hate it. They are so unhappy, but it's like, I can't leave because all I need is another 10 years and I get this retirement and I'm all set. And it's like, okay, I'm glad I never had that problem. I really feel for them because it's true. It's like, you've worked really hard. You're so close to this thing that's pretty awesome. But at the same time, you're really, really miserable.
Yes. Exactly, Jed, that's what I was saying. And in the beginning of the book, I just do a short synopsis. It would be like a preface. It's called Shifting My Story. And I was a teacher in my first career, and I did love it for many, many years. I started very young, so that was a plus, so that by the time I had 30 years in, I had already become a licensed marriage and family therapist and had my practice, and I was doing both. But I remember I went to go meet with the retirement counselor. This was in my early 50s. And he said, Holly, gosh, if you stayed in 5 more years, you would make, you could double, and teachers don't make tons of money, but it would have been a pretty good increase in my retirement. And I said, I can't, plus I could have, but I loved being a therapist and I wanted to be able to build that career, but it was scary. Mm-hmm. I was taking something very secure, very, every month that check comes in, and then moving, full time into my private practice where it was a little uncertain and risky. So I get that and I understand that. And I talk about that, in Shifting Bravely as well.
Yeah. Well, Holly, you and I could talk all night long, but we need to be able to let people know where they can go to find out more about Shifting Bravely, A Path to Growth, Healing, and Transformation, and also find out about all the other wonderful books that you've created.
Thank you, Jed. The best way is on Amazon, although any of them can be purchased through an independent bookstore or your favorite bookstore because they're through a traditional publisher. It's available, as with all my books now, Kindle and paperback. I do want to say it's been a consistently for the past few weeks, a #1 new release in recovery. Both in Kindle and paperback, and a hot new release, like #5 and #7 in the category of recovery. So although it's, as you heard us say today, it's applicable in other areas. Mm-hmm. But back to your question, Amazon, easy, and big. Oh, I do want to add one thing, Jed. With the paperback, there's a little bit of backlog because of the pandemic and all that kind of thing. But Kindle, you can get right away.
Awesome. And, if you want to support your local bookstore, you can go to them and ask them if they can order Shifting Bravely, A Path to Growth, Healing, and Transformation by our guest, Holli Kenley. Hey, Holly, I am so happy we had this time. Thanks so much for being back with us.
Jed, thank you so much. Take good care.
Please be sure to join us for the next episode of the Reading with Your Kids podcast. Our guest will be Michael DeMeo. He'll be here to celebrate Mr. DeMeo's books. That's the next episode of the show. I want to thank the folks who made today's show so wonderful. Chris, I want to start by thanking our guest, my buddy, Holli Kenley. Please be sure to check out Shifting Bravely, a path to growth, healing, and transformation. Also want to thank our sponsor, the Salvage for Kids podcast, hosted by our Dean of all things STEM and STEAM, Jennifer Swanson, and Jeff Gagne. You can check it out at salvageforkids.com. Want to thank my team, Alejandra Doherty, Fatima Khan, Rory Grady, Skylar Strauss. I want to thank my beautiful wife for all the support she gives me. Most of all, we all want to thank you. Thank you so much for taking the time to join us today. And as always, thank you so very much for taking the time to make the world a better place by reading with your kids. I'll be looking for you in the next edition of the Reading with Your Kids podcast.